We're closing out the 2025 International Series with the Washington Commanders taking on the Miami Dolphins in Madrid. What looked like an offensive shootout before the season started is now shaping up to be a battle between two broken teams looking ahead to next year. Which team will leave with a win, and which will have a long, sad flight home? We'll see in the simulation, but first, let's get behind the bar and make our drink, the USS Maine. Well, this is it, the last international game of the season. We got the Miami Dolphins taking on the Washington Commanders in Madrid, Spain. This is actually the first ever regular season NFL game played in Spain, so we're ending this international series on a high note. Now, Miami has technically been designated as the home team for this game, so we'll start off with their drink, the Spirit of 72. Initially, this was just going to be Smirnoff's drink for the Dolphins, which was called the Undefeated when I first looked it up, and then they changed that to Bottlenose Blitz sometime between then and when I actually sat down and wrote this script. It's a visually striking drink, but the drink is pretty boring. You know, it's just vodka, pineapple juice, blue curacao, and lime juice. However, I did a quick search and I found the Spirit of 72, a drink that's visually quite similar to Smirnoff's creation, but has a far more interesting spec. Created by Seth Weinberg and based off the margarita, this drink calls for tequila, blue curacao, orange juice, pineapple juice, lime juice, and jalapeno agave syrup. Of course, the name refers to the Dolphins' undefeated 1972 season, the only one of its kind in the NFL. Fittingly, the Commanders' representative for this matchup is the Army and Navy cocktail, a drink I'm honestly shocked I hadn't thought of earlier. The exact origin of this cocktail is unknown. It first appears in print in David Embry's 1948 The Fine Art of Making Drinks, but it almost certainly existed before that. There's two main theories as to what this drink was created for. The first is that it was created for the Army and Navy Club, which is an officers-only club just a little bit north of the White House here in DC. And the other is that it was created for the Army-Navy football game, which first began in 1890. The drink itself is a riff on the gin sour, with that simple syrup swapped for wonderful orgeat. Oh, and also a dash of Angostura bitters added in for good measure. This is one of those drinks where the ingredient list is very solid, but everybody's got their own ratios that they like best. Some call for 2 ounces of gin, an ounce of lemon juice, and 3/4 of an ounce of orgeat. Others call for 1.5 ounces of gin, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice, and only 1/2 ounce of orgeat. David Embry actually suggests the super stripped back recipe, going with 2 ounces of gin, 1/2 ounce of lemon juice, and a mere 1/4 ounce of orgeat. And finally, our hosts, Spain. And will you look at that? I just so happen to have a bottle of sherry ready. How perfect is that? A sherry is a fortified wine, and as a protected designation of origin, you can see right there, it can only come from the Jerez region of Spain, which is down south near Gibraltar. There's many varieties of sherry, and they can mostly be grouped into the sweet and dry categories. The sweet sherries are the ones that you're probably more familiar with. These are dessert wines like your Pedro Jimenez and your cream sherries. They tend to taste very similar to like a port wine with these sort of rich, dark notes of caramel, date, and fig. However, perhaps the most well-known sherry, and the kind that I have here, Amontillado, is a dry sherry. Now, all sherries are around 15 to 22% ABV, but while the sweet sherries can get upwards of 200 grams of sugar per liter, dry sherries typically don't break 5 grams per liter. Honestly, this sherry is unlike anything I've had before. There is a little bit of sweetness when you first taste it, but that fades pretty quickly with the primary notes of like salted lemon and nuts like almonds filling in afterwards. So I absolutely had to keep the unique flavor profile of this Amontillado in the drink. And beyond this, it was pretty much just keeping the most distinctive elements from both of our representatives. So the blue curacao from the Dolphins and the orgeat for the Commanders. The big decision, honestly, was whether to go with tequila versus gin as the base for this drink. And I ultimately settled on tequila, giving us a final spec of 1.5 ounces of tequila. This is the Reposado that I just recently got for the Cardinals versus Cowboys cocktail. It's a very good Reposado and relatively cheap as well. Very good, you know, bang for your buck out of this bottle. I'm very happy with it. 1/2 ounce of our sherry. Woo. Been getting very good mileage out of this sherry as well. Let's see, are we halfway done with that? Oh, we're not even close to halfway done with that. I gotta start just drinking this neat. 1/2 ounce of our blue curacao. This will be interesting. Like, I don't know how the color is gonna look with the blue curacao and the orgeat. That'll be an interesting little combination, you know? We got lemon juice, so it could come out kind of green. Speaking of, 1 ounce of our lemon juice. Still got my labeled little bottle of it here so that I can tell it apart from the lime juice. And then finally, 3/4 of an ounce of our orgeat syrup. Now this Lieber & Co. orgeat is the most common one if you go looking online for orgeat, and it is very good. I would certainly recommend it. You can also make your own if that's more your speed. I am just simply far too busy to make my own orgeat syrup, as it's one of the more involved syrups to make, I would say. All right, and we're gonna shake that up. Yep, blue curacao has definitely made its mark on this drink. We're gonna strain that into our rocks glass. There's that toothpaste color. But hey, it's a Dolphins drink, so you know, that's fitting. We're staying on brand here. All right, now you know we've got the Navy, because it's an Army and Navy. The Dolphins aren't really playing into this, but we're in Spain, and so you know I had to remember the Maine. This is the USS Maine. Let's give it a try. Ooh. Oh. Whoa. Okay. The mouthfeel of this drink is wonderful. The way... Wow, okay, hold on. This drink does something really interesting, which is the mouthfeel and the flavor evolution play together very well. This is a bit of an interesting, like, I haven't gotten to talk about this much before, but that orgeat syrup, one of the things it does is it kind of, it adds some body, you know, some thickness feels like the wrong word, because typically when you think of like a liquid being thick, it kind of sounds unappetizing. But it gives the drink more weight in your mouth, if that makes sense, you know? And so when it comes in, and initially comes in reading quite sweet, you know, because it's sort of, that orgeat syrup is sweet, the blue curacao is sweet, it's very smooth. The lemon juice brings a lot of brightness to it as well, though. And so what you get is you sort of get this like sweet and not heavy in a cloying way, but heavy in like a physical sensation. Like the drink physically feels heavy on the tongue as it's sort of initially sweet, but then as it passes, you know, into the back of your throat, it physically lightens up on the tongue, and the flavor profile also lightens up, because instead of being as sweet as it was previously, it's now into those sort of like drier, nutty notes from the sherry, and the nutty notes. Ooh, this is really cool as well. So that orgeat is, you know, almond is one of the main flavors in that orgeat. And so the nuttiness of the orgeat is playing into the nuttiness of the sherry as well. And they're like, you know, sort of, they're aligning themselves and like synchronizing up in a really nice way. This is a good drink. Wow, okay, hold on. Wow, okay. You still get some of the tequila coming through as well. Like, this is actually, for how many other ingredients are in this drink, this is surprisingly like tequila forward. You really do, you taste it, despite everything else going on. All of the other notes are very kind of like supporting. They're not clashing with the tequila flavor. They're not overruling that tequila flavor. They're very much like acting as support to bolster that flavor. That lemon juice as well, like a full ounce of lemon juice sounds like a lot of acid initially, but it is absolutely needed because it brings so much brightness and life to this drink. And it really just like, I was not expecting this one to be this good. What the fuck, dude? Like, this drink legitimately has a case to be one of my favorites of the series so far. It works so well together. And it looks, I will say, the one thing I'll say about this drink is this drink probably has the biggest disconnect between what it looks like and how it tastes. This drink looks, you know, it looks like toothpaste, you know? It looks like artificially colored water at like a mini golf course, you know? It doesn't taste, obviously, anything like that though. It tastes like lemons and nuts and agave. Like, that sweetness really is sort of like present throughout this drink, but it's not overbearing and it's not cloying. And like, oh my god, what was the drink? The Talon Punch from last week, right? That was one where the artificial notes of the blue curacao really kind of got brought to the forefront in a really nasty way. This drink has none of it. None of those artificial notes from the blue curacao come through at all. Honestly, very little of its flavor, period, comes through. It really is kind of just here for the color. But I think, you know, with a Dolphins matchup, having that color really fits well. I'm fucking geeking out right now, man. This is so good. Wow. Yeah, that like, so our flavor trio, or I guess it's not a trio, there's 4, you know, but they kind of form a trio of flavors, right? You have, the main flavor notes are like nut, you know, that sort of almond nuttiness. You're getting that from the orgeat and from the sherry. Then there's the brightness of the acid of the lemon. That's obviously straight lemon. And then there's sweetness. And the sweetness has sort of 2 characteristics to it, right? You've got the agave sweetness from the tequila, and then you've got the sweetness of just sort of sugar from the orgeat. And that, wow. That 1, 2, 3 is so good together. Holy shit. I mean, if I'm looking for like a knock, like I guess I could say it's not the longest evolution in the world. It progresses pretty quickly. You know, it's kind of like boop, boop, boop. You know, it's like sweet, acid, nut, you know, bing, bang, bong. Very sort of quick. But I don't think that I don't think the speed of that flavor progression works against it. I think it actually works in its favor because it means that they're overlapping. And they're not kind of distinct. They do kind of like blur and blend a little bit in just a wonderful way. God damn, I love this drink. Well, I hope the people of Spain love this matchup as much as I love this drink. Will it be any good? Who knows, but we'll find out in the simulation. The commies get the ball first, and they still have Jaden Daniels as this was simmed before that nasty elbow injury. That said, it doesn't make much difference initially as they go 3 and out on their opening drive. The Dolphins are moving the ball well on their opening drive. On 3rd down, Tua steps up and fires to the back of the end zone, but it's broken up. However, the Dolphins hit the 38-yarder to put the first points on the board here in Spain. On their following drive, the Commanders run a little play action, and Jaden tosses one up to Terry, who catches it and leaves the Dolphins defender hopelessly lost as he takes it in for the 73-yard score. These offenses were pretty quiet for a bit, before Bill wakes everybody back up with an 8-yard rushing TD halfway through the second quarter. Having shaken off the jet lag, the Dolphins offense marches down the field, and with 2 minutes left in the half, Tua turns into Jaden Daniels and scrambles in for the 13-yard touchdown. However, the Commanders run a very tight 2-minute drill and make it all the way down to the Dolphins' 8-yard line with 20 seconds left. Sadly, the Madden AI kinda sucks at clock management, so the clock runs down to 4 seconds before they call their final timeout and kick the chip shot field goal, going into halftime up 17-10. Facing a 3rd and long on their opening drive, the Commanders call a corner blitz, which leaves Jalen Waddle running wide open downfield, who Tua hits for the 80-yard score, tying this game up at 17. However, this Dolphins defense just has no answers for this Washington offense, as they march down the field and have Bill carry it on in for his second touchdown of the game, retaking the lead. The Commanders seem to have learned their lesson on the following drive, as they've got Waddle double covered, but Tua tosses up an absolute dime where only he can catch it, putting them just outside the red zone. Unfortunately for them, the offense then immediately stalled out, leaving them to settle for a 45-yard field goal. The Commanders are right back in the Dolphins' red zone in the fourth quarter, and needing a big third down stop, the Dolphins' defense of course just lets Daniels waltz into the end zone untouched, extending their lead to 11. The Dolphins' drive burns 4 minutes off the clock, and a sack on third down leaves them needing to convert a 4th and 21 to keep this game alive. So of course Tua gets chased down for his 6th sack of the game. From there, the Commanders would just hold on to the ball and run out the rest of the clock, eventually kneeling it out on the Dolphins' 6-yard line, leaving Spain with a 31-20 victory. Now, do I think the Commanders are going to win this game? Yes. However, not having Jaden Daniels absolutely changes the complexion of this game for Washington. I think it'll be far closer with Mariota under center, but I still trust the overall competency of the Commanders far more than I do the Dolphins. Speaking of quarterbacks and competency, both of these QBs had really good games with not an interception in sight. Now, the miraculously healed Jaden Daniels definitely had the better game, throwing for a clean 300 yards and 1 touchdown with only 2 incompletions. Both QBs actually had exactly 20 pass attempts, but Tua had 5 incompletions, so he only racked up 263 yards. Both of these running backs had pretty quiet games, though Bill did manage to find the end zone twice, so a really efficient performance there. Now, this would be Achane's worst game of the season, but it's actually really similar to his game against the Patriots in Week 2. He had 11 rushes for 30 yards in that one, so same amount of rushes, but 8 more yards. As for the quarterbacks, Mariota's a mobile quarterback, but I don't see him putting up these numbers. 96 yards is over twice his high this season. Now, 3 scrambles for 28 yards sounds reasonable for Tua, but he actually hasn't had a game like this since 2022. With both QBs having good games slinging the ball, we've got a 100-yard receiver on both teams. Scary Terry led all receivers with 6 receptions for 145 yards. It actually seems like there's a chance he doesn't play in this matchup in order to avoid re-aggravating that quad injury before their bye. On the Miami side, Jalen Waddle unsurprisingly leads the way with 119 yards and a touchdown on only 4 catches. Down at the bottom of the stat sheet, perhaps the most surprising thing is Zach Ertz only having 1 reception. Obviously, if Terry isn't playing, he'll be seeing a lot more targets, but even in the games where he has played, Ertz tends to get around 3 catches. Now, because the Monte Carlo sim was run before Jaden's injury, he's still here and putting up around 200 passing yards. On the running back side of things, Achane has a far better game, averaging 68 rushing yards, but Bill actually stays right around 30 yards. The receivers are also pretty similar in the Monte Carlo sim and Madden, with Waddle and McLaurin leading their respective teams. See previous statement about Terry's involvement in this game. Zach Ertz does see a far more reasonable 3.5 receptions in the Monte Carlo sim, though. Results-wise, this is actually a really high-scoring game by Monte Carlo standards, and also a quite spread-out distribution. The most common outcome is a 21-17 Dolphins victory, but that only occurs around 2% of the time. When you average out all 10,000 simulated games, the balance shifts back towards the Commanders, who win here as well with a 20-18 final score. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drink for this matchup is the delightfully deceptive USS Maine. If you make it, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.